I think sometimes, at least I've seen a lot of citizens feel discouraged from getting engaged because they think they've done everything they can. They've talked to their elected officials and they're not getting responses. And the other one, I don't want to make you talk about things you're not really comfortable with. But also the other part is where elected officials are saying things that are sometimes disparaging to their own citizens. And I don't think that builds up trust in public institutions and elected officials. So,
Yeah.
when we're trying to get more engagement and having that early conversation, I wonder if those are things that are talked about, or if you wouldn't mind sharing some thoughts about that.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great point. And it really saddens me when people feel that their voice doesn't have an influence or it doesn't matter. And it's not the case. I mean, I've seen how public speakers have, significantly changed the course of decisions. I've gone into meetings, thinking I would be voting one way, but then heard from speakers and ended up voting a different way. Um, I'm thinking of an example around some on-street parking changes we were making, and
Around my place, I think.
well, yeah, exactly. And it was a really great example of so one of the tensions is I think sometimes when people feel that they're not heard, I think there's a difference between not being heard and not being agreed with. And
Okay.
so I think that, I truly do listen and hear all the voices that are shared with me, all the perspectives. I don't always agree with all those perspectives. So for example, sometimes I hear concerns, let's say about affordable housing. So I hear concerns that affordable housing is going to be bringing crime to the area. So when I hear that perspective, I'm not ignoring that perspective. I don't think that perspective, a person can have that perspective. I will listen and hear them out and make sure that I'm fully understanding where they're coming from. But then I often try to share, some of what our data shows, some of what, other neighborhoods' experiences have been, which is that, those two things aren't correlated, that affordable housing isn't correlated with criminal activity in the area. And so I can see from that person's perspective, they feel that they're not being heard, because I'm not changing the decision I'm making based on their perspective. But that's where I think it is also two ways. There needs to be dialogue, and being heard, wanting to be heard also means needing to be open to listening as well and having that exchange both ways. But it's not easy. Often this is happening in times when people are feeling very stressed, when they're feeling that their homes might be under threat. So it is a big ask. I appreciate why it can be hard sometimes when people are feeling worried about the future. But it's not for lack of listening. It's not for lack of hearing people out and wanting to hear and understand their perspectives. And again, so this is a great example around the parking. Like, I think after making that decision, I was hearing from folks, and it made a lot of sense. They were raising points that I hadn't fully considered. They were raising concerns that, on reflection hadn't been well thought out. So I think that was actually a great example of that dialogue. And it does always go both ways. That input was really important. I think it got us to a better place in terms of taking a step back, spending a bit more time to review how those parking regulations roll out. And that's where, that's the power of engagement. And it's tricky though. Like I do appreciate how if folks feel really passionate about something and something gets decided not the way that they want it to be, I can see why that is disheartening. But it's still critically important. It still helps to move the needle, open up new thinking, and help us have those dialogues.